Hi, Jim Owen here. I want to talk about this project with my friend Chuck Berkelhammer. The Hussein brothers who made the Ingo Bike came up with another patent that they had. I'd like to show you that. Here's the patent. It was in August 2, 1938. It's patent number 2125568. You can look that up if you like in uspatentoffice.com. And what they wanted to do was have a coaster hub for the Ingo Bike. This is a drawing of it, all in black and white of course, and it's hard to decipher it. So we came up with a little bit in color here to show some of the, oops, got it upside down there, to show some of the features of it. Now the green ring here is the spoke ring, and that rotates, well, the spokes on it, and inside the pink part is the bottom here with the rollers and the side plate, and they have an arm right here, a lock arm. On the green, if you can see it here, there's little cams, and that lock arm engages in the cams. Now the one that we came up with is a little different. We have as a lock ring here, and with this lock ring we have a lock arm that we use. I don't know if you can see that against the background here. There's a little pin sticking out, a roll pin, that rotates around and engages in one of the 12 holes in the side of the lock ring. Here's a completed hub, and it has the lock arm, as I mentioned, the lock ring around the periphery there, and there's a little guide piece here, and that's actually the pivot point for the lock arm. It's kind of hard to see that here. If I push that in, you can see that pivoting, and it's activated by this collar. The collar goes on on there, and there's a bell crank that activates that. We'll show you that in a minute here. This is the bell crank that operates the collar. The shaft goes through here, and that's activated by a connecting rod. Got a short connecting rod that goes down here. It's actually like so on the unit, and these holes here connect to another connecting rod in here that goes to the front, which is engaged in the pedal. Okay, I'll show you that assembly complete on the bike. One of the things that we decided on was to not modify the bike at all. Everything had to be either clamped on or some way secured by the shaft and so on. We didn't want to make any changes to the bike. Just take the old wheel off, mount this one on with all the necessary hardware. Chuck and I thought about this project about 5 years ago, but just didn't have the time. It went by the wayside. So with this COVID pandemic business going on, it gave us some time to think about it. So about a year ago we started working on this, and we made a prototype with a 5-inch hub. And it's the material that we had. It worked fine. There's a little short video of it here. And we did that on the wood frame model. Well, we wanted to make it as close to the original as possible of the patent, and that's on the steel frame model. And there's a few problems you ran into on the patent. The axle is offset from the, well actually it's not offset. Here's where the axle is, and this is the fender brace. Now our problem is the fender brace is in line with the axle, so we had to come up with this business here to offset that. You can see that a little bit better there on a dark background, a light background. And of course here's the hub. Now I want to see what's inside of the hub. We'll just take it apart and show you all that went into making this. Take the collar off. Of course I don't have the screws in the lock ring right now. It's rotating because the lock arm pin is engaged in the ring, the lock ring. Take this off. Take the lock ring off, and inside, this is the assembly. We have the bearing cups on either side with a spacer in between to simulate an axle where they don't move in. That gives a constant dimension. We need that. And there's two side plates. The left side is where all the mechanisms is, and the right side is kind of plain. It just has the bearing cup on it. They're identical except for the extra holes in here. And what this is, I'll show you. We have a Teflon roller with an oilite bearing inside there. And then we have a little shaft, a hollow shaft, that actually rides on the roller bearings, ride on it. Then there's another axle that goes through that, and that's tight there. And that's engaged in the two side plates, and they're held in place by a couple of acorn nuts. There's 5 of those going around the inside. Now the lock arm has to be held in with a spring. So we have a spring inside, and a little yoke business kind of straddling the, you can see it there, it's kind of hard to see that, straddling the roller. That's the, of course, being able to tighten this and adjust it from the outside. Inside you can barely see it, there's an acorn nut to keep this yoke piece from coming off. If you unscrew it, it's possible it could fall off and the spring could be on the inside, and we don't want those floating around in there. And then underneath the lock arm on that screw, there's a lock nut. Once you have it adjusted, you tighten that. You have to have everything tight. This does vibrate as it goes around. As I mentioned, the lock ring on one, spoke ring on one side contains this assembly. And we did the same thing on the other side, but this lock ring here, we couldn't do that on there because we have to be able to get the thing off. Now there's 2 screws that hold that on, and when it's assembled with a lock ring, the other 10 screws hold it together. The purpose of that is so that you can have it laced up on the rim, and you'll still be able to take the thing apart while it's on there instead of taking all the spokes out. Oops. I gotta push that in. There it is. We'll have a demonstration ride here coming up shortly. Here's a close-up of the operation of the lock arm and the lock arm ring. As you push the pedal, it releases. Release the pedal and it engages through this linkage. The foot pedal is activated by someone standing and riding on the bike. Through this linkage, to the first bell crank, transferring the motion to an up and down motion right there. Lower bell crank connecting by a linkage up to the offset bell crank. I'll show you another view of that one. Here's the offset bell crank. It engages the collar, engages the lock arm, which is releases, and as you can see it's released, and it engages. And there's the coaster position. Release, and it engages. In lacing the wheels with this coaster hub, I tried 3 different spoke cross patterns. This is a 3 cross, and it seemed rather extreme to me, so I thought, well, let's try a 2 cross. And there's the 2 cross. It's very similar, but the spokes near the hub aren't as spread out as far compared to a conventional small hub. So That's the one I finally settled on for the first bike. And here is, I also tried a one cross pattern. Well, it looks pretty similar to a small hub. However, I don't think you get the strength because it's pretty close to a radial with no crosses. So that's what we tried on the different lacing with this coaster hub. This is a lacing pattern used on the blue Ingo Bike. And this is the lacing pattern used on the red Ingo Bike. Even though the hub and the rims are the same on all three, the spoke lengths are different because of the different travel or distance from the hub hole to the rim itself. So there's three different length spokes used here. When Chuck and I started this project, the goal was to make two bikes with this coaster hub, Chuck's bike and Jim's bike. You'll see the before and after pictures also. I've included those. So here's Chuck's before picture, and here's Chuck's after picture, painted in a nice blue. And here's Jim's before picture, really a rust bucket. And here's Jim's after picture. That's the one used in the ride with my grandson, Jimmy. To spiff them up, they needed new footboards themselves, so we put those on and new footboard mats. The picture shows here on the red bike. Also, to top it off, we put on hand grips with the words Ingo Bike engraved in them.